doctors at the present time, in India especially, tend to be highly respected. Is that correct? Did any of you practice in the West at any time?
I worked in the UK for about 5 years.
I see. They're not so much respected in the UK.
Some places, yes.
Is it?
They do consider them very well.
Is it? Yeah.
But most places in India, they consider doctors.
In general, in India there is still some culture of respect. There's a kind. Before there was a caste system, and now there's a different kind of hierarchy. It doesn't matter. Well, still caste is there, but there's different considerations. But still, there's a culture of respect, and it works the other way too. There's a culture of contempt also. But in the West, it's the democratic ethos means they don't respect anyone. They just contemn everyone. Now, why I'm mentioning that is because previously in India, in the caste system, actually the doctors, they weren't rated so highly. The Vaidya was considered not of very high status. So, of course, the old caste system, there are many problems with that. Hare Krishna. That is described by our Gauriya Acharyas as the Asura Varnashram. And in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Charto Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhavasha. That this system of Varna and Ashram is actually created by Bhagavan himself. So it's not inherently bad, but the misuse of it is bad. Yeah. Daivi Varnashram means that system in which the different Varnas and Ashrams cooperate for the glorification and service of Bhagavan. So therefore, we find in Shastra statements such as Swakarmana tamabhyarcha siddhing vindati manavaha, that everyone can achieve the highest perfection by performing his work and worshipping. Swakarmana, performing his own work, and tam abhyarcha, and worshipping him, siddhing vindati manavaha, everyone can achieve perfection. That's from Bhagavad Gita. And from Srimad Bhagavatam, there are many similar statements. Atha pumbet vijashreshta vanashrama vibhagashaha svanushchithasya dharmasya samsiddhya haritoshanam. That the highest perfection one can achieve by performing duties within the Varnashram system is to act in a manner that Bhagavan Hari is satisfied. Then famous verse from the Vishnu Purana, when you're coming from the Sampradaya of Sri Ramanuja Acharya, so this verse is well known. Varnashramacharabhata purushena parapuman Vishnu aradhyate panta nanyatatto shakaranam. That acting within the Varnashram system, Varnashramacharabhata purushena parapuman, worshipping Bhagavan Hari, specifically worshipping Vishnu Aradhyate. By following this process, everyone can achieve perfection. Now, of course, we find in the Ramanuja Sampradaya that, well, Sri Ramanuja himself, he, although born in a Brahmana family, he emphasized the importance of Hari Bhakti, not of simply observing hierarchical status. We find among the Alvas also that Bhagavan himself made arrangements by which his devotees would be glorified even if they're from a supposedly lower status. So this is the point, that in the Daivi Varnashram, our acharyas, our Gauriya acharyas have noted the difference between Daivi Varnashram and Asura Varnashram. Asura Varnashram means simply based on birth, one thinks that a higher position is meant for exploiting others. Whereas the Daivi Varnashram means everyone cooperates to serve Bhagavan Hari. It's a practical arrangement. Our Srila Prabhupada, preaching all over the world, would often speak about the Varnashram system in the Western countries where people have no idea of it, and if they have any idea of it, they tend to relate to the caste system, which is a perversion. The caste system as it was going on until recently, and is still, something like that is still going on in some parts of India, mostly for the sake of oppressing others. But mostly in this part in most of India it's broken down, and it's only there for marriage, and that's also breaking down. So Srila Prabhupada would speak about this, and he would say it's a scientific division of society, because whether you call Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra, you'll find all over the world there are some kind of people who are intellectual by nature, some kind of people who are leaders of society by nature. They like to, it's their nature to take charge. Some people by nature are very interested in production and making money. And some people by nature, they don't have any particular self-motivation. They just work for someone else, that's all. And they're not particularly skilled. So the Varnashram system is a scientific division of people according to their qualities, as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. Srila Prabhupada also criticized the education system. In many ways he criticized it. They tried to train everyone in the same way, but people should be trained differently according to their nature. It's no use to try to train someone who's got no aptitude for it in for instance, mathematics and all kinds of intellectual pursuits, when anyway he's maybe going to be an auto mechanic or a truck driver. Better to train him from an early age in mechanics. And actually that was going on until recently, until they made all these rules against child labor. But the child would be better, the child is going to be a mechanic, rather than sitting in the school not learning things which he can't learn, which he has no aptitude for. If he learns that which he has an aptitude for, which he likes to do, he'll be more content, and it's more practical. So anyway, these are all points that Srila Prabhupada was making. Now the Daivi Varnashram, it's everyone. This idea is everyone cooperates. The Brahmanas are considered like the head of society. The Kshatriyas like the arms, which protect. The Vaishyas like the stomach, which distributes energy to the rest of the body, and the Shudras like the legs. But although among all of these the head is the most important, because if the head is cut off, you don't need to be a doctor to say what happens to the body. But it's not that we consider the leg unimportant, or the arms unimportant, or the stomach unimportant. All are required. But in Daivi Varnashram, the emphasis is on spiritual realization. Understanding that the purpose of life is spiritual realization. And therefore the Brahmanas were respected because of their practical renunciation and spiritual knowledge and ability to guide others on the spiritual path. Which I'll come back to the first point I made, that doctors weren't so much respected because they were concerned with the body, which is important because if the body is not healthy, then it's difficult to do anything. And unless one is very spiritually advanced, then poor health will make it difficult to pursue spiritual practices, either physically, that if you can't move, then you can't go to the temple, and mentally also. If one has to concentrate the mind on Bhagavan, but the mind is disturbed by pain or sickness, then it's very difficult to perform sadhana or any activities of bhakti. So the body is important, but it's not considered, or is not as important as the soul or spiritual development. So therefore, doctors were not accorded the same kind of status as today, when in the modern age the body is considered all important because people have lost their spiritual direction and people are simply interested in sense enjoyment, how we can enjoy the body. So who can help to keep the body in shape so that it can go on enjoying. Sensual enjoyment is rated very highly, at least. That's a possible reason. It's probably more complex than that. Society is very complex, but at least this much we can deduce from this. Of course, there are other reasons. In the Asura Varnashram, they put too much emphasis on ritual purity and impurity, not understanding that purity of consciousness is the most important. And so, therefore, the surgeon was considered low caste because he was dealing in blood. Although in modern society, the surgeon is, among doctors, the surgeon is considered, various types of surgeons are considered more prestigious. And the neurosurgeon is heart surgeon, and then above that, I think heart surgeon is the most prestigious, but above him is the neurosurgeon, because without this, you're a neurosurgeon? Yes. So these two things are essential. I mean, you can get by without a kidney, or you can cut out half your liver and still go on, or get someone else's liver. Hopefully you'll still go on, but without a heart or a brain, then you fit into the Bhagavad Gita verse, Tata Dehantara Praptihi. It's described in Bhagavad Gita. Dehanta Prapti, changing body. Actually, there's a book of some of Srila Prabhupada's conversations, correspondence, called The Science of Self-Realization. And Srila Prabhupada wrote a letter, it's recorded in that book, in which he was told by one of his disciples that there was a heart surgeon in Toronto, Canada, who had publicly declared, well, he didn't use the word spirit or spiritual, but he said, I've seen hundreds of deaths, and it seems to me there's something, it's not just a mechanical change that you say, well, the heart function failed, brain waves are zero, respiration stopped, dead. But it's not just that the functions of the body cease, but it seems to me that there's a particular moment where something leaves the body. He said something. He didn't say what, but in our language we'd say it's the soul. And that's the whole beginning teaching of Bhagavad Gita. There's the Deha and the Dehi, the soul and the body and the soul. And understanding the difference between this is the entrance into spiritual life. So Srila Prabhupada wrote a long letter to him that yes, actually it's a fact, which if one is a little bit sensitive, he can observe this. And it would actually improve the whole profession of medicine if this simple fact were understood. We find in Bhagavad Gita, again Lord Krishna states, that Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe juna tishtati. That Ishvara is within the heart of, or hridesha, in the region of the heart of all living beings. Now, often people ask me, this is usually translated as the Supreme Lord is in everyone's heart. So often people ask, then what happens with a heart surgery? If the soul and Bhagavan are within the heart, then when there's a heart surgery, what happens? The soul should get transferred from one body to another. But that's not the actual Sanskrit. The actual Sanskrit is hrideshe, which means in the region of the heart. It's usually translated as in the heart because it means more or less the same thing, but it specifically says hrideshe, in the region of the heart. So when the apparatus of the heart is transferred, the soul remains in that region. And actually Srila Prabhupada also proposed that, you see, the heart is the source of energy for the body. An amazing machine. But where does it get its energy from? What is it that makes the heart beat? What is the actual source of energy in the body? What is it that makes all the different systems within the body interact and work? Or you could say, well, oxygen is the source of energy, but it's not. But the oxygen also can't do its job unless everything else is in place. So the heart is the source of energy. But what is the source of energy for the heart? And that is the soul. As long as the soul is there, the heart goes on beating. When the soul leaves, then mechanically the heart may beat for a short time. Just like sometimes it's seen that a chicken's head is cut off, but still the body flaps for a little time. There's no actual, you can't say that it's alive, but some mechanical function is going on. So Srila Prabhupada said that this should be a source of study for scientists. At MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when he was giving a lecture there, the most prestigious institute of technology in the world, after which we have MIT in Manipur. But the original is in Boston, Massachusetts. MIT. So Prabhupada, he pointed out that for all its departments of study, and so many big brains from all over the world, there is no faculty for studying the difference between a living body and a dead body. Why is there not research into this? Well, maybe one reason is because it's just presumed in modern medicine or in modern science in general. There's a presumed mechanistic worldview that we can only accept as reality that which is perceivable or measurable by sense perception. What we can see, what we can perceive, not just see, what we can hear, touch, smell, feel, taste, and hypothesis based on that. This is what is called science. It's a mechanistic outlook. It presumes from the beginning that there is nothing spiritual. But this presumption from the very beginning puts a severe limit on the possibilities of understanding reality, because it makes an unfounded and actually unreasonable assumption that all of reality is within the scope of human sense perception and what can be extrapolated from human sense perception. But it's actually much more reasonable to consider that there may be all kinds of areas of reality outside the scope of human sense perception. And of course theories are there of antimatter, for instance. Or the idea that everything ultimately can be explained by numbers. Why? Why should everything ultimately... Physicists want to explain everything by numbers, but why? Why should everything be explainable by numbers? And like I say, it's mechanistic, and it actually produces a very crude outlook on life. If we presume there's no spirit, then emotions and pain are just seen, happiness, pain, they're all seen as just interactions of matter. So just like you can program a machine that if you shine a red light on it, it will say, I see a red light. But it doesn't, we know that it's just a machine and it has no actual consciousness or experience of red light. But those with a grossly mechanistic outlook, they like to say that when we feel pain, I'm sure as doctors you're daily seeing lots of pain, both physical and psychological, emotional. Then it's just that pain, they like to say, it's just a kind of some kind of reaction of chemicals. So it's a very cold outlook, isn't it? To think that no one's actually feeling any pain. It's just a reaction of something going on in the neurosystem. Srila Prabhupada also, just one point about Srila Prabhupada and his books and his teachings. One reason he was so successful in spreading this Krishna consciousness in the West, there are various reasons for that, and one reason is his ability to apply the Vedic knowledge to all kinds of situations and to show that Ved means Ved, because Ved means knowledge. It's not a Hindu dogmatic or sectarian religion. Just like we say Christian religion, Muslim religion, Hindu religion, but Ved means knowledge. So knowledge should be applicable in all circumstances. Just like 2 plus 2 equals 4 is true for a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, the knowledge is independent of anyone's belief system. So generally we think of Hinduism as being another kind of belief system, but Srila Prabhupada presented that this is Ved, this is knowledge. So he was able to apply, because he understood this principle, that it's not, this is Veda Narayanam Sakshat. This is knowledge coming directly from Narayana. It's not someone's dogmatic opinion. So he was able to apply that knowledge in all kinds of circumstances, which if it is actually knowledge, then it should be applicable to the cultural milieu of the West, and it's not something Indian. This Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita is not something Indian, it's knowledge. Just like I happened to be present once when there was a journalist in London who asked, Srila Prabhupada had a verse quoted from Bhagavad Gita by one of his disciples who read the Sanskrit. So then that's also in that book, Science of Self-Realization. This interview is recorded. So that radio interviewer, Mike Robinson, he asked Srila Prabhupada about the role of the scripture. And Srila Prabhupada gave a very apt example. He was speaking into a microphone, and he said, it's just like when you get a microphone, you get a manual that goes with it, which tells you what it's meant for and how to use it. So he said, in the same way, the Shastra, the Veda, that is knowledge of the creation. What we are doing here and how to utilize this situation for its actual purpose. It tells us what is the purpose of our existence. Just like what is the purpose of a mic. If you don't know, you might think, well, it's good for hitting someone on the head with, or maybe you could use it for stirring the dal. You could do all those things with a mic, but it's not and if you want to hit someone on the head, there are better things to use than that. Or if you want to stir the dal, there are better things to use than that. In fact, you'll spoil the real use of the mic, which is for interacting with the rest of the components to amplify sound. It will be spoiled by doing that. So it tells you what its actual purpose is, and then how to use it to get the best effect. So in the same way, the Vedic knowledge is given by the creator of the universe at the time of creation for the point of understanding what we are doing here and how to make the best use of our situation in all ways. That's why we'll find within the Vedic knowledge there are all kinds of, apart from the Vedanta or the Upanishads, or the spiritual knowledge, and then even beyond that, or the complete fruition of the Vedic knowledge is Srimad Bhagavatam. Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu. This is the actual subject of all the Vedas, is the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, apart from that, there are all kinds of directions for how to live in this world. So therefore we find Ayurveda and Vastu Shastra. That's why you had us pointing east. There's a reason for that. And then which direction we should eat in at different times of day, and what direction we should sleep in, what time we should sleep in, and what times we should eat at, and all these things are given in Shastra to help us to maximize the functionability of our bodies and how our bodies interact with everything else within the world, so that we can bring to fruition the ultimate goal of life, which is to understand that we're not the body at all. We enter one body after another, but we have to end this Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janani Jatare Shayanam, and go to the spiritual world. So I was saying that Srila Prabhupada was very expert at presenting the Vedic knowledge in terms of modern society, and he, just like the heart surgeon, Srila Prabhupada, complimented him that yes, by intuition, you've come across an essential fact of existence, which is described elaborately in Shastra. How what was I saying about MIT? Yeah, there's no department that shows the difference between a living body and a dead body. So like this, and Srila Prabhupada, he would also point out the defects. Where there's good things, he would say, yes, this is good. When there's something bad or mistaken, he would point out, this is a defect. You see, you have so many departments of knowledge here at MIT and studying science in so many ways, but you don't know the difference between a living body and a dead body, and you should find out. Otherwise, it's a huge lacuna in your knowledge. Why isn't it there? What is the actual nature of life cannot be sufficiently described simply in mechanistic terms. You can say that, well, as long as the heart function is there, the various respiratory system and the brain functions are there, you can say it's alive. But what is the nature of life? It cannot be described in terms of the body alone. One very interesting thing which maybe some of you have had experiences with, it's been documented widely over the last 30 years or so. It's not part of mainstream science, but many mainstream scientists, including doctors, have noted what they call NDEs, probably neurosurgeons and heart surgeons, near-death experiences, where it seems to be quite a common scenario, because it's been reported in various situations all over the world where people die, and clinically they're dead. And after some time they come back again and say they come to life again. They're already, signed, sealed and delivered, ready for the casket, but then they just come back to life again, and then they describe some experience. Or there are, this is even much more common, out-of-body experiences. It's very common in surgery. I mean, not very common, but common enough that there are many cases which have been documented in which a patient, it often happens under anesthesia, deep anesthesia, in surgery, where the person, although he's unconscious, afterwards he describes everything the surgeon was saying, and even the jokes he was telling, and all this kind of thing, because he was he's sitting above the body. The soul goes out of the soul in the subtle body sits above and can explain everything that was going on, although they were unconscious. If they'd been conscious, then they would have been screaming because of the pain. So there are various, there have been certain scientists, or in a let's put it this way, in a scientific manner, especially over the last 30 years, there have been investigations into many phenomena which are still considered taboo by what are called orthodox scientists. Another one is investigation into reincarnation. There was one Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was a psychologist who spent his whole life investigating cases of reincarnation, in which he found hundreds of cases, documented cases all over the world, where, for instance, a 5-year-old girl would talk about her husband in another village, and the family would have never heard of the village, and then they find out that there's some village like 200 miles away, and they go there, and she names all the people in the family, but she looks confused that, oh, this is the way to the ruler. And I say, oh yeah, well, it was there, but just 2 years ago we blocked the door. So like this, in many, many cases, documented like this. So it is possible to, in a what we could call a scientific and dispassionate way, investigate various phenomena which substantiate the teachings of the Vedas about life and death and rebirth. But because of the overwhelmingly mechanistic outlook of modern science, in which they prima facie presume that there can be nothing spiritual, it's actually a great blockage in it's like a clot which kills the true spirit of science, that they're like firmly opposed to even admitting that there can be anything spiritual. I'm not saying you, but it is in what we would call it's the general stream of mainstream science, even though many scientists of various disciplines consider themselves religious or theistic. But they'll say things like, well, I believe in God, but as a scientist, and then they'll talk something which is completely against any theistic strand of thought. So, Srila Prabhupada was pointing out some of these defects in the mechanistic worldview, that it's actually not reasonable to presume from the very beginning that there's nothing spiritual, because you can't measure it. There's no soulometer. There's so many ometers for measuring so many different types of energy, and there's so many different ways of measuring distance, light, sound, various energies, specific gravity and density of liquids, and all kinds of things. There are various instruments for measuring, but the soul, by its very definition, because it's not material, cannot be measured in a material way. So to say that we cannot perceive the soul by any material means doesn't mean that there isn't a spiritual means to attain. You have to find the right means to perceive it. Just like if you bring a ruler to measure light, that's stupid, isn't it? It's for measuring distance, short distances. So there's a certain methodology in every discipline. That's why someone may be the world's best heart surgeon, but you wouldn't want to stick him on a brain surgery, because he knows his area and there's a certain methodology, and however brilliant he may be in one area, just like Einstein, you wouldn't want to call him, if Einstein was to reincarnate right here now, and there was a need for an urgent brain surgery, even though he's the most famous scientist of the modern era, you wouldn't want to have him as he doesn't know anything about it. So, like that, there's certain methodologies for various disciplines, and you have to follow the methodology to become an expert in it. There's a certain process for becoming expert in it. So in the same way, there is a spiritual methodology that is called Bhakti Yoga, which if it is followed, then one can become spiritually realized. And there are symptoms of spiritually realized persons, just like there's symptoms of a healthy body. So the symptoms of one who is spiritually advanced, that means he's detached. from material sense enjoyment and is attached to praising Krishna. That's at the highest level of spiritual realization. Now, of course, understanding these points, it can be, it does require some deep investigation, because just like we did, the subject of Krishna consciousness is consciousness. So, consciousness, it may appear to be, or it has been supposed in science to be a product of matter, although there are now schools of consciousness studies which I'm told have necessarily come about because of quantum research, that the role of the observer, the consciousness of the observer, has to be factored in. But traditionally in science it's been presumed that consciousness is a result of various conditions of the brain. And it might seem like that, because, for instance, by administering various drugs, the state of consciousness of the person alters. The drug has an effect on various mechanisms within the brain, and thus we have amphetamines and barbiturates, and they have, you can, or in the gross language of the Western world, uppers and downers. So, or we'll see, for instance, there was someone I knew who was in an accident, and afterwards their whole nature, I've seen it, I mean you've probably seen it hundreds of times, and I've seen it in the case of at least two people I know, is that after an accident in which they sustained head injuries, that their nature changed, and in both cases for the worse. Actually. So there appears to be a distinct relationship between the brain and consciousness. But Srila Prabhupada explained that the brain is not actually the source of consciousness or the vital factor. That consciousness is independent of the brain, but the brain works as a machine or something like, you can say, like the hardware in a computer. That's a gross example, because a computer doesn't work without any hardware, although the consciousness can exist. That the whole point of what Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad Gita is that the consciousness is not dependent upon the body. And this is a very important point, because if the consciousness was dependent upon the brain, then with the end of the brain function, then consciousness would cease to exist. But rather, the Bhagavad Gita, rather Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita that the consciousness is a symptom of the soul, which is manifest through the body. But the soul is independent of the body. And when the body dies, the soul, what we say by death, is not actually the death of the living being, but it means that the living being no longer functions through that apparatus. So there's the body and the brain. So the brain is, the body is the apparatus for eating, walking, defecating, digesting, all these different things. and the brain is the apparatus for thinking, emotions, memory, discrimination, sense of right and wrong. But according to the Bhagavad Gita, these are functions that take place, that the brain acts as an apparatus, but that the intelligence is connected to the soul, not to the brain itself, because life is not dependent upon the brain. Now, at that point I was talking about the near-death experience and the out-of-body experience. Shows that these demonstrate that even though the body can be technically dead, the person continues to exist, independent of the body. Or even though the consciousness is apparently not unconscious in deep anesthesia, the person can continue to exist independently. Although the person's been put into deep anesthesia, he continues to perceive everything that's going on around him. So these are questions which scientifically minded people should take up. As I was saying, there are theistic scientists and doctors all over the world who often make statements like this, that I believe in God, but as a doctor or as a scientist, and then they kind of separate in their in their way of thinking that, okay, I went to the church or the temple or the synagogue and here I have my religious hat on. And then when I'm in the hospital, I have my surgeon's cap on. And it's like you keep the two areas of thinking separate. Emotionally, I believe in God. Scientifically, I act as a scientist. But Srila Prabhupada, I'm saying he was maybe unique in the sense that he presented Krishna consciousness as a science, in other words, as a holistic view of reality in which being religious and being scientific are not two different ways of looking at the world. But rather, if Veda is actually knowledge, then it's not, like I said, 2 + 2 = 4. It's not dependent upon time, place, circumstance, or opinion. It's not that, well, Krishna is a Hindu god because the Hindus think he's a god, and therefore Krishna is a Hindu god. But actually, if there is Bhagavan, which that's another discussion altogether, but it's grossly foolish not to consider that there is no Bhagavan, then that Bhagavan is, he's Bhagavan in all times and all places and all circumstances, and we in all, whatever kind of family we may have been, or religious system or irreligious system we may have been born into, the fact of his existence and our relationship with is independent of that. So it's not a matter of belief or believing, but it's a matter of understanding. This is how Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness. I'm not going to go on with it much more now because it's a very big topic, but I just like to, or like this, discuss the possibilities of understanding what is being presented herein in a non-dogmatic manner, that you don't have to say, well, I'm a Hindu or I'm a believer. You know, we should approach this knowledge as first of all, there should be some faith there. Arrant skepticism won't help in any area of knowledge. You can't become a doctor if you're totally skeptical about medicine. to learn anything, you have to be somewhat humble and respectful. If you, just like 2 + 2 = 4, if the child of being says, "Oh, that's all rubbish, I don't believe this. What are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense." Actually, in one sense, it doesn't make any sense, because what is a number anyway? It's just a construct within the mind. But anyway, the point is that one has to be humble and respectful, and in the beginning there has to be some faith in any sphere of knowledge, in any discipline. To imbibe the knowledge, you have to have some faith that what is being taught makes sense. If from the beginning you're skeptical, then you can't make any progress. No one will want to teach you, and your mind is completely closed to learning it. So in the same way, with this knowledge that's given in Srimad Bhagavatam, one has to be somewhat open to receive it in the first place. But the defect of the modern so-called scientific outlook is that there is inculcated a kind of skepticism of anything beyond that which can be measured, which, as I was pointing out, it's not very intelligent actually, to presume that all of reality is measurable by human means. Because we are very tiny, limited living beings with very tiny intelligence, and we have the defects as analyzed in Shastra, Brahm Pramad Vipralipsa Karana Partav. Every human being has the defects of making mistakes. Is there any doctor who can say he never made a mistake? Everyone makes mistakes. To err is human. But to err means we got it wrong. So, to presume that scientists got everything right, I mean, no scientist will accept that anyway. I mean, if you're actually honest, then you have to, know that there's so many things every scientist will admit there's so many things we don't know, and so many things we got wrong, and now we think we got it right, but quite likely someone will come along and point out that what we think is right now is also wrong. And because that's what is taught in school is what was considered right in science is what was considered right 20 years ago. And on the cutting edge of scientific knowledge, what's taught in school now is already out of date. And it's like that. It's always changing, which, as Srila Prabhupada pointed out, is not actually knowledge. It means that people have made some hypotheses which, according to what we presently know, seems to be right. But the fact that it's always changing means that we're not actually on the platform of knowledge. So, Brahm, to make mistakes, to be an illusion, to the cheating propensity, that's coming out more and more, how research scholars, they have a 5-year research funding, and in the first 3 months they find out that the whole thing they're researching, it's all wrong. It doesn't make any, but they keep on fudging the figures because they've got 5 years income. So this kind of thing goes on because the cheating propensity is there. It may be there also just for the sake of prestige, to show that one's made a great discovery. One may fudge the figures. These kind of things go on. Brahm Pramad Vipralipsa Karana Partav, and imperfect senses. We believe what we can measure, but then how well can we see? And how well do we interpret what we see? So the human defects are there. So to presume that everything within reality, we can only accept that which we can measure. Well, that's actually one definition of Maya. Mapiyate anaya iti maya. One dictionary definition of maya is to attempt to measure. And one name of Bhagavan is aprameya. That there's no scientific, clinical method of understanding him. There is another method. It's a different methodology by which he can be understood. But if you say, well, we didn't find Bhagavan with a ruler or with litmus paper or with in refraction of light, and we didn't find him with a hydrometer or a hygrometer or any other ometer, then that means he doesn't exist. It doesn't mean he doesn't exist. It just means that there's no material means of understanding him, which is the whole point, is that he's not material. So to say that there's no material means of understanding him doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. It means he exists beyond the range of material perception. But it doesn't mean that there cannot be any method of spiritual perception, which is being talked about in Srimad Bhagavatam, where the important name of Bhagavan is given as Adhokshaja, which means that he is, by his very nature, he is beyond the sense of mundane. Adha Akshaja. Aksha means eyes, Akshaja means everything. Ja literally means that which is born, so it means everything within the scope of visual perception. And Adha in this sense means beyond or above. So by very definition, he never is going to be found by any mundane method. One has to accept the spiritual method, which is heart to heart. The method of cultivating love for him. Now, as I was saying, in the holy mechanistic outlook, love is simply something that goes on, something that goes on in the brain. So if you look deeply enough within the brain, maybe you'll find a love cell. Well, maybe you will. But that doesn't explain, even if you do, just like you can find, there are certain nerves which, the perception within the brain, the messages which are sent by the nerves, and that is called pain. But it doesn't really explain pain. You can tell someone and they're experiencing excruciating pain, and you can tell them, well, actually it's just the nerve sending a message to the brain, and you can tell them that, but it doesn't really help them very much because the experience of pain is excruciating. So the experience of, according to the Bhagavad philosophy, the experience of love, that is also intense, and that is the goal of life, to foster that sense of love. We have to know what is the proper object of that love. The proper object of that love is Bhagavan, Hari. There's a method to do that, and by developing that love, that will lift us beyond the platform of pain. We will become qualified to enter this spiritual world, the world beyond pain. There's no pain in the spiritual world. So there is a methodology for developing our fully blossomed sense of love. It's not a material methodology, it's a spiritual methodology, which if one applies himself to it, he becomes fully spiritually realized. But to the person who's totally mundane, it would appear that he's just a sentimentalist. So it's up to every individual to decide whether they want to remain on the totally dry outlook of just perceiving everything as matter, or the enlivening outlook of going beyond matter to the spiritual. So, as I was saying, it's some kind of introduction from how Srila Prabhupada, using this non-technical language, as he would say, I am not a scientist. Actually, he was a pharmaceutical. He was a, how would you say, pharmaceutician? Pharmacologist. He was a manufacturer of medicine in his secular life before he accepted sannyasa. Is it pharmacologist? No, he was pharmacist. Okay. Well, he was manufacturing medicine, so maybe that's different from one who dispenses them. He was manufacturing and selling. So he had some basic knowledge of chemistry, you could say. Prabhupada said, I'm not a scientist. But he spoke on the principles of science. And he asked his disciple, he had disciples who were professional scientists. And he asked them to explain these points in scientific language for the benefit of the scientific community, who need to hear all these things in scientific terms. So I'm speaking from the platform that Srila Prabhupada spoke, that of a layman in science, speaking on certain principles of how science can be actually immensely benefited by not trying to give, by knowing its limits and not trying to explain all of reality. It has its place, but it's not all in all. All right, I'll finish that. Hare Krishna. Sorry for coming so late. We had a packed up program all day.
Can I ask for one query?
Yes, please do so.
I won't go into much background. Direct question. Creator created this world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense. And Creator wants this world to continue as per his scheme.
The question comes after the premise.
Yes, correct.
So this is the premise.
Therefore, let me add.
Well, this premise needs a little modification. The premise that you said...
When I go ahead, the premise will be clear.
All right.
As it is defined in our Shastras that ultimate aim of human body is to attain salvation, or say he becomes self-realized.
Yeah.
If that happens, will the original schemes of the Creator will be able to sail through? Why?
Well, this question is often asked, that what happens if everyone becomes self-realized?
Yes,
the world,
I don't want to say in those words.
The world will stop.
Yes, you have got it.
The world will stop. Well, in the second premise you offered, that the Lord wants the world to go on according to His scheme, the answer is yes and no to that one. This world is compared to a prison house for the jivas who are not willing to submit themselves to Bhagavan, which is their constitutional position, in which they can be fully happy like that. So the material world is a complex prison created by the Lord for the jivas to act out their fantasy of there being no Bhagavan and their fantasy of Ishvaraham aham bhogi, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, of thinking themselves in control. There's no controller. Jagad, you see, this atheistic philosophy is nothing new. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes atheistic people who say, asatyam apratishtamte jagadahur anishvaram. Atheistic people say there's no ultimate reality, there's no God in control. So they like to think, I am the controller and I am the enjoyer. And they come to the prison house and they say, well, it's not a prison. You can go anywhere you like. Well, you can't go anywhere you like. You can't do anything you like. And we are bound by Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi, birth, death, old age and disease. We are bound by Sattva Raja Tamagun. So this world is like a prison house. The example is there. It's just like the government, they build a prison house. Actually, I went to prison 3 days ago. I did a program in a prison in Goa. So the government builds a prison and it conducts the prison according to its rules. But they don't really want a prison. The prison is there for the inevitable misbehaved people. So this world is going on according to God's plan, yes, but it's really due to the misuse of independence of the jivas. The love is all. Means that Bhagavan, He is Rasamai, Rasovaisaha. He interacts with the jivas out of love. But love means to choose to love and serve someone. That much independence the jiva has, to choose to serve Bhagavan or forget Bhagavan. He gives that much independence. If there was no independence, then there would be no love. If people offer, in the spiritual world, if people offered food or offered arati to Bhagavan, if they were just programmed to do that, then it wouldn't be any fun, would it? You could probably have a robot as a wife, but who wants a robot as a wife? You could get someone, you get a machine to cook the idlis, and you could maybe even get because in family life there's some kind of rasa. Sometimes the husband and wife have a little quarrel, and it's kind of adds some mirchi or something to the family life. It's kind of fun. Although it's apparently not fun, but actually it's fun. So, maybe not quarrel, but just say, oh, you're always coming home late, and like this. But it's a kind of fun exchange between the husband. So you could probably program a robot to do that also. But there wouldn't be any fun in doing that, would there? If you had a robot wife saying, oh, why did you come? The robot wife is programmed that when you come in at 11 o'clock at night, so then the clock inside the robot says, oh, why are you coming so late? But it's just like that machine I was saying. You can program a machine to say, I see a red light, when a red light is shone on it, but there's no consciousness of it actually seeing a red light, even though it says, I see a red light. We know it's, when you shine a red light on a machine that's programmed to do that, it says, I see a red light, but there's no person there. So in the same way, Bhagavan can program the jivas just to do what he wants, but there's no fun. There's no love. So in the same way, for this reason the jivas are given independence. They can serve him or not serve him, and if they serve him, that's love. And if they don't serve him, they don't want to serve him, they want to forget him, so they come to this material world. It's like a prison house. So yes, it is running on according to God's direction, but he doesn't really want it, which is why he comes to this world, to tell us, hey folks, it's a lot better in my place, why don't you come over there? There's just a few rules you have to follow. You have to submit yourself to me. Mamekam sharanam vraja. So the question, well, what would happen if everyone surrendered to him? Well, they won't, because some people don't. They don't want to. They're stubborn. They don't want to. If they did, it'd be nice. Then we could close down the prison. The government doesn't really want to keep a prison open. But the prison is just like if the government builds a new city. Sometimes in some kind, like Brasilia was constructed as the Chandigarh was constructed. There are new cities. Gurgaon, I guess. Previously it was Gurgaon. Now it's Gur traffic jam. It's big buildings and. So when they build a new city, they also build a prison. That doesn't mean they're thinking, we're going to catch some people and throw them in the prison. But they know that if you have a city of, a few lakh people, that there's going to be a few among them who would be better on the inside of the prison than the outside, because they're antisocial elements. So they build a prison because they know someone's going to misbehave. So I hope that answered your question. We're all prisoners, you see. The doctors are, we're all criminals in this way. The doctors are high-class criminals. Yes.
Body is a machine.
Body is a machine, yeah. Amazing machine, isn't it?
It's a machine.
But isn't it amazing? Really, if someone is open-minded, they would see that even a single cell is so complex that why don't you see that it must take a great intelligence to make that? It's when I was at school in the biology class, you'd laugh at this. They said that the cell is a very simple organism, and within 20 years, we'll be able to make cells from raw matter. And then, when I was at school, that was like 35 years something. And, now they found out it's not as simple as they thought. Probably at the time they were teaching it, they like I was saying, whatever they teach, it's 20 years out of date. So even the simplest cell, what to speak of brain cells? Well, that's another thing I was reading recently, that neurologists, they're not really sure how the brain works. It's only a theory that impulses are transferred from one cell to another, but it's not really proved. I saw this in a scientific magazine. They're not really sure that's the theory, but they're not really sure if that's true. So it's incredibly complex. Even the simplest cells are very complex, and how they all interact with each other, and how all the different, the respiratory system, the lymph system, how it all interacts. It's incredibly complex. So it's actually incredibly stupid to think that there's no intelligence behind all this. The idea that it all came into being by chance is the most fantastic mythology, and that people teach it as science. I think in future people are going to look back and they're going to think, it's like some kind of, just like we laugh now when they talk about, we hear about Christopher Columbus. He faced a mutiny from his sailors because they said, we're not going to sail any further west, we're going to fall off the edge of the world. So we laugh when we hear this, the idea that the world is flat, and people used to think that the world is flat, and if you sail far enough you'll fall off the edge. Niagara Falls is nothing. So we laugh when we hear this. So in future people are going to imagine, how could people think that life has come into being simply by chance combination of chemicals. It's such a absurd theory, but people, it's hotly defended. It's considered unscientific not to believe that, even though there's not even the slightest shred of actual scientific proof of it. I mean, just like Prabhupada was saying at MIT, that what is the difference between a living body and a dead body? Why don't find out? Why isn't there a research department to find this out? There's AIDS research, cancer research, and even they studied some malaria research, although they weren't that much bothered about it because it's only third world people who die from malaria. So there wasn't much in malaria research, even though lakhs of people, maybe crores, suffer from malaria every year, and it's a horrible disease. Well, every disease is horrible. But why is there no death research department? You want to stop AIDS because you want to stop people dying. You want to stop cancer because you want to stop people dying. Well, why don't scientifically investigate the nature of death and stop it? Stop the whole thing, and you won't need to separate AIDS research, cancer research, and Parkinson's disease research, and this. Just have a death. Put it all under one umbrella. Death research. My supposition is that this is not being attempted because deep down inside, scientists know that the nature of death is beyond their scope to stop. Because the nature of life is not simply mechanical. The fact that there is no death research department, despite the billions of dollars that are spent every year in various kinds of research, there's no one even thought to have a department to investigate how to stop death, suggests that intrinsically scientists understand, although they may not admit it, that the nature of life and death is beyond their scope of perception or manipulation. So indirectly they're admitting the need of theology.
One of the things,
Yes, please tell me.
I will just since we say that body is a machine. Suppose we do have a machine.
All right,
soul has come into the body.
Yeah.
And we see through it.
Oh, that's another point.
To be in a machine.
The difference should
be manufactured in a factory. Soul to be inside that.
Well, as you were saying that the world is being managed by God, so He has His systems of doing things. You can put in, there are now artificial limbs and artificial organs, but there's no artificial life.
A very fantastic computer, thinking person.
Well, computers they can beat the best chess grandmasters in the world. The computer, which is programmed by a human being, can be programmed to defeat the world chess champion. That's already happened. But does that mean? Now, there's another whole area: artificial intelligence. Does that mean that the computer, it duplicates the thought process of the chess player, because the chess player sees the various possibilities in advance. So actually playing chess, although it requires high intelligence, it is a kind of logical, mechanical intelligence. But chess doesn't deal with the emotions. The same example. You can program a a machine that if you bang it with a hammer, it will say ouch. That doesn't mean it feels any pain. So you can program a computer to have intelligence, but but you can't program it to feel emotions. And that is the difference between the robot wife and the real wife. The robot wife might wash your laundry better. Wives nowadays, they don't know. The maid always used to do it. Now it's the washing machine. So, the robot wife, you never know. They might be able to be programmed to cook idli sambar better than your own wife. But however much you congratulate, hey, that's really great sambar, the machine wife can say, well, thank you very much, but it can be programmed to say that. But there's no actual exchange of feeling. So that's what's missing.
But in many of these other Puranas, they talk about trees having souls, they talk about stones having souls.
Because where there is life, there is the presence of the soul. That's why a baby is stillborn. It's the same body, it has all the apparatus for growing, but it doesn't grow. Because the soul has left during childbirth. The body either grows or rots due to the presence or non-presence of the soul. The same body, which if you kill is a murder case. If you take someone and burn them to death, that's a murder case. So if someone, you burn them to death, but the same person, if he dies a natural death 24 hours later, then if you don't take that body for burning, the same body, that's also a crime. To burn the same body, if you burn it, that's a crime. Then 24 hours later when he dies a natural death, if you don't burn it, that's a crime. So what's the difference? It's the presence or non-presence of the soul. As long as the soul is there, the body functions. As long as when the soul goes, it starts to rot.
What about souls being inanimate objects?
Well, you say there are souls in. There are some. There's
story in Ramayana.
Yeah, there's.
Stone being,
Well, there are souls in some stones, not in every stone. They may enter a stone also, but that is. With the presence of the soul is consciousness, and we see there is birth, growth. There are 6 stages described in Shastra. There is birth, growth, some period of stability, production of byproducts in the form of children, and then dwindling and death. But in the case of a stone, well, some stones do grow. That's also documented. But in general, the consciousness is very much covered. The soul may be there, but that's a punishment actually for the soul to be put in such a condition. It's a very covered condition. It means the consciousness is almost completely dormant. But it is described in Shastra that some mountains are conscious, just like Parvati means the daughter of Parvat Maharaj, who's also known as Himava, so Himalaya. So some mountains are said to be conscious, and they may exist in more than one form also, just like Ganga exists as a river and exists as a goddess also. So that's also possible. And naturally, people living in a village, they sense the spirits of various trees, like this. They sense the spirit of the river, There's at the very low level of religion, there's worship of Gramya Devatas and spirits of trees and rivers. So that's also there. Everything in nature has consciousness. Therefore, we find there's the god of the ocean personified.
So,
trees, yeah. Yes, please.
Sir, I'm sorry to. This is my question also. This is my question also.
Okay, good. We welcome.
You believe in Lord Krishna?
Yeah.
You believe in Hindu religion?
No.
Word over, sir. Word over, word.
No, but actually, again, the premise is mistaken. You see.
Let me finish, sir.
Yeah, but
1 second only.
you can finish, but the premise is mistaken. So then.
1 second, sir.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing. Except Hindu religion, no religion is said to be mythology. Nobody calls Quran Sharif as mythology. Nobody calls Bible as mythology. Nobody calls Guru Granth Sahib as mythology. Only Hindu system of sect of this puja is said to be mythology. Word over why?
Well, that's because.
And people are accepting and repeating it.
That's because of the British. I don't call it mythology. Mythology.
You have used the word mythology, just the Hindu mythology you have told. You used this word a few minutes before. I'm sorry to say, sir.
Really?
This
in what
Hindu
context?
mythology word you used, that's why I pointed out.
I'm sorry, I really don't remember saying that.
No, I don't want to ask you. I don't want to ask you.
It's not my habit to say
I just
so.
want to know.
I don't accept
it is
it.
being used by word over. Why it is singled out religion, which is said to be based on myths and known as mythology? Word over.
Well, again, we don't call ourselves Hindu specifically. Hindu is a word which was given by Muslims. It's not in Shastra. The term mythology, it actually comes from the Greek myth, which comes from the Sanskrit mithya.
Mithya means wrong. Mithya means wrong.
False.
Which is false.
False. Yeah.
But why this word is specifically tagged with
The British,
Hindu mythology?
the British, this is also documented. They had the idea, medieval Europe had the idea that Christianity is all in all, and that those who are not Christian, they're heathens. When they came to India, they found a highly advanced philosophical theology which actually makes Christianity looks pretty childish and stupid, actually. I mean there are some very serious problems in Christian mythology, if you want to call it that.
I don't know. I don't want to call anything.
Standard Christian theology is that because someone, our great grandfather ate an apple, therefore that's the cause of all human suffering. They also say, anyway, there's no actual information of God or how He created the world, or it's actually just dogmatic. They say you just have to believe it. And they came in contact with a very sophisticated system of philosophy. And they deliberately made a plan to deprecate it. And to make it look stupid. And so they said, what is all this rubbish, elephant-headed gods? Although in the Bible they have God appearing as a burning bush. And why that there cannot be, because we didn't see a person with an elephant face doesn't mean that there's nowhere in the universe, there's no one with a human body and elephant face. But rather than honestly coming to face to face with the philosophical challenge and being willing to accept that actually there is more sophisticated knowledge in the Vedic literature, they instead made a deliberate plan The study of Sanskrit was begun in Oxford University with the specific purpose of showing the inferiority of the Hindu system of religion, as they called it. And Hindus have accepted these terms. Idol, they also use the word idol, which is for murti or Sri Vigraha. An idol is actually it's a pejorative term. Idolatry. It means worship of something which is there's nothing actually there, but people worship it out of foolishness. So Hindus have unwittingly accepted this deprecatory language, and I don't know how you heard that, because I don't talk about
any newspaper, any discussions. Word over, whenever I read, I go through the
there's a whole program.
Everybody quotes Hindu mythology.
Yeah.
Never I have heard any this type of derogatory word like mythology attached with any other religion.
Well, this is another topic actually. It's not really been the source of my lecture this evening. But it is quite amazing how Hindus are so tolerant of the deprecation of their belief system.
I am vocal, sir. I always
and it's amazing that probably India must be the only country in the world in which the majority institutionalized. We talk about oppressed minorities, but Hindus are an oppressed majority, which is ridiculous. But anyway, like I say, it's not really the topic. But you see, this can be overcome by scientific presentation. Srila Prabhupada always he didn't go to the West and tell people become Hindus. He presented that this is genuine spiritual knowledge that transcends all sectarian boundaries. That this culture is the best culture for God realization, which is why people took it up. People are looking for the truth. It's not that Westerners wanted to pick up a flag and say, Garv se kaho hum Hindu hai, or Wahi par mandir banenge. It is not for that purpose that they came to this. It's because they found that what in Christianity was not given. Because people have scientific education in the modern age. And because of this scientific presentation, they were convinced by that. And not just by the presentation, but by the experience, by the purity of Srila Prabhupada in his whole way of life. They were convinced by that. So, actually to promote this culture, but actually by accepting that this is Hindu dharma, it's actually falling into a trap. Because it's not Hinduism. It should be presented that this is factual spiritual knowledge, which if people are serious to understand it, can be demonstrated to be superior to all other systems. And when we say it's superior, it's not just to show that we're the best and you're useless, but rather to share this invaluable knowledge with others for the sake of their uplift. If we say to the Christian that, very good, you believe in God, now here's some knowledge by which your belief in God can become improved. This should be presented. But if we say Hindu, then we fall into the Hindu box, and we got to make enemies of the Muslims and enemies of the Christians. And it just becomes a sectarian belief instead of a scientific presentation for the uplift of the soul. Therefore, we are not Hindu fundamentalists.
We are the most tolerant people in the world. We tolerated everything.
Yeah, but why tolerate your own degradation? There should be education in spiritual values. Bhagavad Gita should not be banned from the schools. Christian conversion is going on. Because there are various reasons for that. One reason is because one thing is the so-called Hindu swamis. They're just promoting themselves instead of giving actual spiritual knowledge by which people can be benefited. And another, what's going on is absurd, actually. Mostly Hinduism more and more is becoming like this self-promoting cults. There are so many people claiming to be Bhagavan, and so you'll find the pictures of all these different various gurus posted everywhere. It's self-promotion, and it's actually very shallow. And people who want to know, there are various reasons. It's a complex thing, but we're also not much in favor of this conversion to Christianity, because it doesn't actually help people spiritually. They become envious of Krishna and Rama and Ganesh, and they become blasphemous, and they eat cows, which most Hindus still don't, although many are beginning to do so. So it's actually a step down from the Vedic culture, but the Vedic culture is not being presented properly. If it were presented properly, then why should people leave it? If they're actually getting something better, then why should they go for something lower? So the real way to preserve this culture is to actually follow it and teach it for the benefit of others with the spirit of Vasundhaiva Kutumbakam. And this sectarianism is also not part of what you call Hindu Dharma. It's difficult in an age where people are so much sectarian. It's difficult not to fall in that trap of becoming a Hindu pitted against a Muslim. But it doesn't really serve the cause of Vedic culture to fall into that kind of fundamentalist mentality. It's a complex question because social issues are complex, especially in the modern age. And various approaches are needed. But the best is to bring people to a higher level of consciousness, which is what the Vedic teachings are all about, to raise the consciousness. Hare Krishna.